This training lesson will cover bulk operations with SQL commands. For those of you who are already familiar with SQL syntax, this should be very straightforward. For those of you who are not, we do recommend that you purchase a primer book on SQL commands. They're readily available, and having a minimum working knowledge of SQL will be very helpful, since that is the primary mechanism for accessing database information, and that is one of the most important features within Visual App Builder Pro. To get started on this training lesson, we're going to go ahead and import a couple more tables out of our test database. If you didn't watch the earlier lesson on importing data, please do so. And what we'll import is our sales order table, and we'll create a modal dialog where we can select a sales order number and display all the line items on that sales order. So we'll go ahead and import that table now. It now shows up on our File tab. We can double click on it. It'll jump us over to our File Fields tab, and you can see all the fields within it. This is basically the detail record for a sales order, so it has all the line items and quantities. Now if we go back over to our File tab, to prepare for a bulk operation, meaning an operation that pulls all the records down based on our SQL where clause, our selection criteria, and puts them into a flat file, we need some way of referencing that flat file that gets created. So we're going to go ahead and use the copy file button, and you'll see that that creates a copy. And if we double click on this table, we'll see that it has exactly the same record structure as the original SQL table. We're going to go ahead and do some editing on this. We're going to change the name to so.dat, and we're going to change the file type to a fixed length without carriage return and line feed. This is by default how the bulk operation in the SQL object creates a flat file for us to process. The advantage of creating a flat file is that you do not have to send repeated SQL commands over either your direct connect or your wireless link, and so it's a performance issue. You actually save time if you have a large number of records that you're pulling out of your database that need to be processed. I think this will become a little bit clearer as we get further into this. So within our sales order procedure, let's go ahead and make our modal dialog box. And on our modal dialog box, let's create a field for entering the sales order number. And then let's do something new. Let's put a list control below that, and this is where we'll display the line items for the sales order that's entered. Let's create a variable to hold the sales order number. And let's assign that variable to our edit control. You'll notice now that the names of our new files, both our SQL table and our flat file, now appear in our list of files, our drop-down list of files. And this is consistent across all objects within the entire Visual App Builder project. We'll go ahead and select a variable, sales order number. Now we'll go ahead and create our SQL command where we will select our sales order number. This will be an SQL object. We'll edit this object by double clicking on it. The table that we're working with is the sales order table, and here we're doing a bulk operation. Now a bulk operation is, the syntax is identical to a select SQL statement. So in this case we're going to select where the sales order number is equal to the value in our variable for sales order, which is what the user typed in at the edit control on the modal dialog. But now, instead of just pointing the cursor in the database at the first record that meets the selection criteria, the COM manager process will actually select all the records out of the SQL table, and we'll append them one after another into a flat file, and we'll transfer it down to your handheld device, and you will be able to reference that by the so.dat file. What Command Manager does is takes the name of the table, the first 8 characters from the name of the table, and appends .dat to the end of it to form the file name when it bulks it down. So now that we've done that, within our modal dialog, we can go to this list control and actually cause the contents of that file, so.dat, to be displayed in this list control. And the way that we do this, we'll go ahead and give it a meaningful name, is by adding display items. We'll click on the Add button. We'll call the first column the item ID, which is synonymous with the barcode. We'll select so.dat because this is the file that we'll actually be populating this list control from, and we'll select item ID. For the second column, we'll display the quantity. Again, out of so.dat, quantity. So now to go back to the entry point of the SO procedure, the first thing that we'll want to do is select so.dat, and then after that we'll want to go to the modal dialog box. If nothing meets the selection criteria, we can just return an error. NOF or not on file, make that an error alert screen. And return an error from this procedure. But as long as there are items, line items for this particular sales order, we can go to the SO modal screen. At this point we're going to diverge slightly here, add a couple new procedures. One called SO init. This will be the initialization procedure for this modal dialog box, and another called SO OK. And this will be the action that's performed when the user clicks on the OK button within this stored procedure. And we're going to demonstrate how to move this select command out of the procedure containing the modal dialog box into the procedure that will be applied when the user clicks the OK button. And the way that we do that is to get SO select out of the chain of objects that are being executed. We can now look in the tree view and we can see that we no longer have the selection taking place here within this procedure. We're going straight to the modal dialog box once the user clicks on the sales order button on the main window. And so that means that we can now move the objects. In this case, these two objects, we'll select both of them and we'll move them to the OK procedure, because we really don't want to execute these particular objects until the user clicks on the OK button. So now we'll go ahead and do the move. It'll prompt us to make sure that that's what we want to do. And now if we go look at the OK, we'll see that once the user clicks on the OK button, it is here that we'll want to go ahead and do the selection criteria. And it'll be at this point that we'll want to populate the list control if we successfully get some records back. Type of object here is a list combo box item. We only have one list within our project. All your lists and combo boxes would show up in this particular drop down. And we're going to select the method here. You've got a lot of methods, and we've got a later training lesson to go through this in more detail. But we're just going to do the populate from file. In the initialization, we're just going to want to clear the list. which is an update control object that allows us to do that. We'll find our list, which is right there, and we'll check the little box for clear controls. Now, in order to have this initialization take place, we have to come back to our modal dialog. We have to right-click for actions on the dialog itself, and for the initial update, we're going to add the SO init. So what this does is it causes this procedure to run before the modal dialog is actually displayed to the user. So at this point, I think we're ready to go ahead and try this out. We'll click on Save and run the simulator. Click on the sales order button. And here's our sales order modal dialog box. We'll type in a sales order number, click on the OK button, but we have not hooked up our OK button yet. Let's go back to our modal dialog box, and you'll notice that here on the OK button we have not specified to go do the SOOK action. Once that completes, we're going to do nothing. This will force the user to have to use the cancel button in order to dismiss this dialog to get back to the main menu. Let's go ahead and save that again. Run the simulator. Enter our sales order number, click OK, and you'll see that sales order not on file. So what has happened here is a SQL command has been issued to the database, and it's told us that that particular sales order number does not exist within the database. So as you recall from a previous training lesson, we can go to the Retriever Software folder in just Windows Explorer and look at our SQL.log and see our commands that were issued. In this particular case, there was a SQL bulk asterisk from test.so where SO is equal to 17, and it returned no records matched. Now if we go back and enter a value that actually exists in our database, we'll go ahead and run our simulator one more time. Type in a value that actually exists in the database, and you'll see that this time it found the records, it created the so.dat file, and it populated the list control from that so.dat entry. So that completes this particular lesson. There's a very thorough test project called ODBC Test that includes a great deal of samples on how to do various SQL commands, custom SQL commands, and stored procedures in particular. So we recommend that you check out that ODBC Test project, particularly if you need to work with stored procedures.